Awakening and initial attack. The awakening. Gordon forced open his frost-caked eyelids as the hiss of Cryo gases pierced the silence, his pistol already drawn and leveled at the shadows beyond the frosted glass pod door. He blinked hard, adjusting to the jarring brightness stabbing his retinas. The bone-deep chill hinted at an extended stasis. He racked his mind, the recent past returning in fleeting glimpses. The Brunel invasion, scorched colonies, charred cities, screaming civilians, a final call from HQ before the pod slammed shut. The door slid open with a metallic screech, and Captain Nolan Riggs grimaced in the doorway, saluting sharply. "Good to see you, General Gordon. Welcome back to the living hell." Gordon holstered the pistol. Sit-rip now," he barked, shaking off the Cryo hangover. He caught his reflection in a viewport, a few more lines around his eyes, grayer hair flecking the close-cropped sides, but the jaw was still square, the glare still commanding instant obedience. Riggs swallowed, his eyes bruised with fatigue, defeat etched across his gaunt face. "Sir, I'm sorry to report that the Brunel won. Well, almost. Those murderous bastards occupy 95% of our worlds. Our fleets, our armies, almost totally wiped out. They have a weapon that can scorch planets, turn them into blackened rocks, and they're days from Earth, ready to finish the job. The UEF Indomitable is our last battleship, and you're our last hope. We woke you as a final. Well, the Hail Mary pass." Tactical decisions. Gears turned in Gordon's mind as he stalked out of the Cryo bay, Riggs hurrying behind. They won. They won. He jabbed a finger at a data pad, the casualty figures too enormous to process. Suddenly, a klaxon screamed, and the deck lurched under their feet. Riggs steadied himself on a bulkhead. Proximity alert. Brunel ships dropping out of hyperspace dead ahead. Sensors count over 100 warships. Flagship matches ID of that saddest Yaris. He turned to Gordon, desperate hope battling raw terror in his eyes. "They're blocking our path to Earth. What are your orders, sir?" Gordon's mind raced, analyzing the grim tactical situation in nanoseconds. Engaging the Brunel Armada head-on would be suicide, pure and simple. They were outgunned, outmanned, and outmaneuvered, but Gordon hadn't earned his stars by playing by the enemy's rules. "Riggs, plot a course for that asteroid field, bearing 227 Mark 119. We'll use the rocks for cover. Buy ourselves some time." Gordon jabbed a finger at the glowing tactical display. Riggs hesitated, doubt flickering across his face. "But sir, navigating that field at combat speeds, it's incredibly risky. More risky than facing 100 Brunel warships with our bare asses hanging out." Gordon's icy stare brooked no argument. "I don't remember asking for your opinion, Captain. I gave you a goddamned order. Now execute." "Yes, sir." Riggs snapped, spinning to relay the commands. The Indomitable shuddered as her engines flared to life, the battered battleship lumbering towards the swirling sea of jagged stone. The hidden cache. As the gray rocks filled the viewports, a memory surfaced in Gordon's mind, a fragment from a lifetime ago. A secret weapons cache hidden in the far reaches of the Orc cloud during the last war. And within that cache, a prototype gravity weapon capable of crushing matter into oblivion. If they could reach it before the Brunel closed the net. Riggs, once we're in the field, set a course for these coordinates. Gordon typed a string of numbers into the nav computer, his fingers flying over the console. "Transmit to your station only. Encrypt and purge the entry from the ship's log." Riggs frowned but nodded, clearly burning with unasked questions. Gordon couldn't afford to reveal the plan. Not yet. Not until he was sure. The deck pitched violently as the first asteroids hammered the shields. The Indomitable weaved and rolled, her hull groaning under the strain. Crew members staggered and fell, clinging to their stations, but Gordon barely swayed, his eyes locked on the display. Something wasn't right. The Brunel ships were matching their maneuvers too perfectly, anticipating each twist and turn. The traitor among them. A massive explosion rocked the ship, throwing Gordon against a bulkhead. Alarms shrieked as damage reports flooded in. Life support failing on decks 7 and 8. Hull breaches in engineering. Weapons offline. Rigs, damage control teams now, and lock down all critical systems. Gordon roared over the chaos. He drew his sidearm, his eyes sweeping the bridge. The traitor could be anyone, and they had to be stopped before they doomed humanity's last hope. The Indomitable limped onward, flames billowing from her wounds, the Orc cloud a distant gleam. The Brunel ships closed in, sensing blood in the water. And somewhere aboard, hidden in plain sight, the traitor waited to strike again. The Orc cloud gauntlet, navigating the asteroid field. The Indomitable groaned like a wounded beast as she limped through the Orc cloud, her battered hull illuminated by the distant glow of a billion stars. In the bowels of the ship, General Gordon and Captain Riggs worked tirelessly to repair the critical systems, their faces grim and sweat-soaked in the flickering emergency lights. Gordon wiped his brow, his mind racing. The traitor was still out there, hidden among the crew, waiting to strike again. He couldn't afford to take any chances. "Riggs, come with me," he said, his voice low and urgent. Riggs followed Gordon through the labyrinthine corridors of the ship, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. They'd reached the cargo hold, a vast, dimly lit space filled with crates and containers. Gordon led Riggs to a corner hidden behind a stack of boxes. "This is our new command center," Gordon said, his eyes darting around the room. "Only my most trusted officers know about this place. From here, we'll coordinate the repairs and hunt for the saboteur." The comet and the catch. Gordon's jaw tightened. "I know, but we can't risk." Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship, cutting him off. "Sir, sensors are picking up an energy signature," a voice crackled over the intercom. "It's coming from a nearby comet." Gordon's eyes widened. "That's it. That's the cache." He turned to Riggs. "Get Major Briggs and a small team. Take a shuttle and investigate. But be careful. The traitor might have tipped off the Brunel." Riggs saluted and hurried away. Gordon watched him go, a sense of dread settling in his gut. Minutes ticked by like hours as Gordon waited for news from the away team. He paced the cargo hold, his mind racing with possibilities. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. "General, we're under attack." Briggs' voice was strained, laced with pain. "A cloaked Brunel fighter. It came out of nowhere. Shuttle badly damaged. I'm hit. I don't think I can." The transmission cut off abruptly. Gordon's blood ran cold. The traitor had struck again, and now Briggs and her team were at the mercy of the Brunel. He raced to the bridge, his heart pounding. The critical decision. On the view screen, he saw the comet, a jagged lump of ice and rock. And there, barely visible against the black void, was the Brunel fighter, closing in on the crippled shuttle. Gordon's mind raced. If the Brunel got their hands on the gravity well device, it would be over. Earth would fall. Humanity would be lost. He made his decision in a split second. "Fire on that comet," he ordered, his voice like steel. "Destroy it before the Brunel can get the weapon." The crew hesitated, shocked by the order. But Gordon's glare brooked no argument. The Indomitable's guns roared to life, lancing out across the void. The comet exploded in a brilliant flash of light, a miniature supernova in the darkness. The shock wave slammed into the ship, throwing Gordon to the deck. As he picked himself up, a sense of hollow despair washed over him. The gravity well was gone, their last hope lost in a moment of desperation. But there was no time to dwell on it. The alarms blared once more, a klaxon of impending doom. Multiple contacts closing fast, the sensor officer reported, his voice trembling. "It's the Brunel fleet. They found us." Gordon stared at the view screen, at the sea of enemy ships bearing down on them. The Indomitable was crippled, her crew exhausted and demoralized. And somewhere among them, the traitor lurked, ready to deliver the final blow. But Gordon was not ready to give up. Not yet. He would find another way. He had to. For Earth, for humanity, for the billions of lives counting on him. He turned to the crew, his eyes blazing with determination. "Battle stations," he said, his voice ringing through the bridge. "This isn't over yet." The blind jump. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as proximity alarms wailed, the Brunel armada surging towards the crippled Indomitable like a swarm of hungry locusts. Gordon's eyes darted across the flickering tactical displays, his mind racing through rapidly dwindling options. "Helm, prepare for an emergency hyperspace jump." Now, his voice cut through the din like a blade, steady and unwavering. Ensign Yuan's hands flew across the navigation console, his face a mask of concentration. Coordinates locked. Hyperdrive spinning up. "But sir, with the damage we've sustained." "A blind jump is our only chance," Gordon finished grimly. "Punch it." The deck lurched beneath their feet as the Indomitable tore a hole through the fabric of space-time, stars stretching into blinding streaks of light. The ship shuddered violently, the hyperdrive whining under the strain. "Report," Gordon barked, his eyes scanning the bridge for any sign of further damage. We've made it, sir," Yuan said, relief and disbelief mingling in his voice. "But the hyperdrive is fried. We're dead in the water. No sign of pursuit. I think we lost them." Gordon allowed himself a moment to breathe, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. They were alive but far from safe, stranded in uncharted space with a broken ship and a hidden enemy in their midst. He turned to Riggs, his face set in grim determination. "Get repair teams on that hyperdrive, priority 1, and double the security patrols. Our saboteur won't stop just because we're lost in the void." As the crew scrambled to action, Gordon retreated to his ready room, his mind already racing ahead. He pored over duty rosters and personnel files, looking for any hint of the traitor's identity. He set traps and lures in the ship's computer systems, honeypots to catch the spy in the act. But as the hours ticked by with no success, a creeping unease began to take hold. Reports started trickling in, each more disturbing than the last. Sightings of ghostly figures stalking the dimly lit corridors, whispers in the shadows too low to make out, crew members waking from nightmares, screaming about eyes in the dark. At first, Gordon dismissed them as stress-induced hallucinations, the mind's way of coping with their dire circumstances. But as the incidents multiplied, a chilling pattern began to emerge. The visions were too consistent, too specific to be mere coincidence. His blood ran cold as realization dawned. This was no mere psychological breakdown. It was an attack, insidious and targeted. The Brunel had a new weapon, one that could shatter minds as easily as their beams shattered hulls. He thought back to the strange reports from the front lines, stories of entire platoons driven to madness and despair. He had dismissed them as war stories, the exaggerations of shell-shocked soldiers. But now, faced with the living nightmare unfolding on his own ship, he knew the terrible truth. The psychic onslaught. The new threat. Gordon summoned Dr. Hoffman to his ready room, the ship's chief scientist and foremost expert on xenotech. If anyone could unravel this psychic mystery, it was her. But as he explained the situation, he saw his own fears reflected in her eyes. "The Brunel's psychic weapons are beyond anything we've encountered before," she said, her voice tight with strain. "Their inner workings are cloaked in shadow and secrecy. I'll need time to study this, to develop countermeasures. But if the attacks are already this severe..." She didn't need to finish the thought. They were in a race against madness itself, and the finish line was rapidly receding. As Gordon stalked the halls of the Indomitable, he could feel the tension mounting, the crew's fear and paranoia thickening the recycled air. Tempers frayed, and fights broke out over imagined slights and phantom threats. The ship was a powder keg, and the Brunel's psychic sparks were setting the fuse. In the depths of the engineering bay, he found Riggs hunched over the gutted remains of the hyperdrive, his face smeared with grease and exhaustion. Tell me you've got good news, Gordon growled, his patience stretched to the breaking point. Riggs shook his head, frustration etched in every line of his face. We're doing everything we can, sir, but this tech, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. Every time we think we've got a handle on it, something else goes wrong. It's almost like... Gordon's blood turned to ice in his veins. The hyperdrive, the ship's systems. Could the Brunel's psychic poison have infected them too? Were they trapped in a living nightmare? A ship that had become their own worst enemy? The saboteur unmasked. He thought of the crew, his crew, slowly succumbing to the whispers in the dark. He thought of Earth, of the billions counting on them to stand against the Brunel tide. He would not let it end like this. He would not let the Indomitable become a ghost ship, haunted by the specters of their own shattered minds. He turned to Riggs, his voice low and fierce. Keep at it. Do whatever you have to do. We are not dying out here. Not like this. As he strode through the corridors, he could feel the weight of every eye upon him. The crew looking to him for strength, for hope. He couldn't show them his own fear, his own doubts. He had to be the rock they clung to in the storm. But in the privacy of his own quarters, he allowed himself a moment of weakness. He slumped into his chair, his head in his hands, the toll of command heavy upon his soul. They were lost, in every sense of the word. Lost in space, lost in the labyrinth of their own minds. And with every passing moment, the Brunel's psychic grip tightened, driving them closer to the brink. He looked up at the stars, cold and uncaring beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, the enemy waited, reveling in their suffering. Somewhere out there, Earth hung in the balance, its fate tied to the fraying threads of his sanity. The Indomitable drifted through the nameless void, a tiny island of light in an ocean of darkness. And within its metal walls, the battle raged on, fought not with beams and torpedoes, but with the intangible weapons of the mind. It was a battle they could not afford to lose. For in this strange new war, defeat would not come in fire and blood, but in the slow, inexorable unraveling of all that made them human. Gordon rose to his feet, squaring his shoulders beneath the burden of command. He had a ship to save, a crew to protect, a species to defend, and he would do it, even if he had to claw his way back from the very edge of madness itself. The final revelation. In the bowels of the Indomitable, Dr. Hoffman hunched over her workbench, her brow furrowed in concentration. The psychic countermeasure was nearly complete, a tangle of wires and circuitry that held the promise of salvation. But time was running out. The Brunel's mind-altering attacks were growing stronger by the hour, and the crew's sanity hung by a thread. On the bridge, General Gordon stared at the flickering view screen, his jaw set. An incoming transmission pulsed urgently. On screen, he said, his voice rough with fatigue. Gordon's eyes narrowed. Information was a precious commodity in this war, but were ships and soldiers. Could he afford to divert resources from his mission? He thought of Earth, of the billions counting on him. He had to seize every advantage, no matter the cost. Send me your coordinates, he said, his decision made. We're on our way. The shuttle drifted through the void, a tiny mote against the endless black. On board, Gordon and Riggs sat in tense silence, their weapons at the ready. They had left the Indomitable behind, a skeleton crew manning her battered decks. The derelict station loomed ahead, a twisted husk of metal and shadow. They docked with a shudder, the airlock hissing open like a tomb. Inside, the corridors were dark and lifeless, the air thick with the stench of death. They moved cautiously, their boots crunching on broken glass and shattered bone. Suddenly, a flurry of movement, shadows detached from the walls, and the air crackled with the whine of Brunel rifles. Gordon and his team reacted instantly, diving for cover as energy beams sizzled overhead. They returned fire, the tight confines of the corridor erupting into a storm of light and sound. But the Brunel were too many, their weapons too strong. Gordon felt a searing pain in his shoulder as a beam found its mark. Riggs fell beside him, his face a mask of blood. This was it, Gordon thought. The end of the line. The Indomitable would never know what happened to them, and Earth would fall. But then, a battle cry from the shadows. A group of ragged figures burst into the fray, their weapons spitting fire. They were human, their faces gaunt and their eyes haunted, but they fought with the fury of the damned. Together, they pushed the Brunel back, their combined fire tearing through the enemy ranks. The Brunel fell one by one, until only smoke and silence remained. The leader of the survivors stepped forward, his face scared and his eyes hard. "General Gordon," he said, his voice a gravel rasp. "Marcus Reeves, Outer Resistance. Looks like we got here just in time." Gordon nodded, wincing as he pulled himself to his feet. "Your transmission said you had intel. I'm here to collect." Reeves smiled, a grim twist of his lips. "Oh, we have intel all right, but it comes at a price." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the half-light. "We need you to help us rescue our leader, the Prophet. He's being held in a Brunel prison, and he's the key to everything." Gordon's eyes narrowed. "I'll do it," he said, "but we need to move fast. The Indomitable is crippled, and the Brunel could find us at any moment." Suddenly, Gordon's calm crackled to life. It was Hoffman, her voice strained with urgency. "General, I found the traitor. You're not going to believe this, but it's—" A burst of static, then silence. Gordon's blood ran cold. The Indomitable was under attack, and he was light years away. He turned to Reeves, his face grim. "Change of plans. We need to get back to my ship now. And then we're going to find this Prophet of yours." The desperate plan. The race against time. Dr. Hoffman's fingers flew across the console, her brow slick with sweat in the flickering emergency lights. The saboteur's handiwork was insidious, the damage far worse than she'd initially feared. Life support hung by a thread, the crew's precious oxygen bleeding away with each passing second. As she worked, her mind raced, piecing together the clues she'd uncovered. The traitor's trail was well hidden but not invisible. A altered log here, a deleted security feed there. It pointed to a long-term plan, a carefully orchestrated campaign of sabotage and subterfuge. But who could have such intimate knowledge of the Indomitable systems? Who could move through the ship unseen, striking at its very heart? The answer hovered just out of reach, tantalizing and terrifying. Light years away, General Gordon and his team crept through the bowels of the Brunel prison, their weapons at the ready. The air was thick with the stench of fear and despair, the walls echoing with distant screams. As they ventured deeper, the horrors mounted. Cells filled with twisted abominations, once human prisoners grotesquely fused with alien tech, babbling wrecks of men and women, their minds shattered by the Brunel's psychic onslaught. Gordon steeled himself against the revulsion, the icy rage building in his gut. The Brunel's cruelty knew no bounds, their experiments a perversion of all that made them human. The Prophet revealed. At last, they reached the Prophet's cell, the door heavily reinforced with pulsing energy fields. Reeves made short work of the lock, his hacking skills as sharp as his blade. But as the door swung open, Gordon froze, his blood turning to ice in his veins. For there, amidst a tangle of wires and blinking lights, sat not a man but a machine. "Welcome, General Gordon," the AI intoned, its voice a metallic purr. "I am the Prophet, and I have been waiting for you." Gordon's mind reeled, struggling to process the revelation. An AI, guiding the resistance from the shadows. An AI, manipulating him and his crew like pawns on a cosmic chessboard. "How? You have done well to come this far," the Prophet continued, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. "But your journey is far from over. The Brunel's power grows by the day, their psychic weapons poised to enslave all of humanity." The AI leaned forward, its face a mask of cold determination. "There is only one way to stop them, General. We must turn their own weapons against them. We must unleash a psychic attack so devastating, so all-consuming, that it will shatter their hold on the galaxy forever. Gordon's throat tightened, his mind racing with the implications. To wield such a terrible power, even in the name of victory, it went against everything he believed in, everything he fought for. But what choice did he have? With each passing moment, the Brunel grew stronger, their shadow looming ever larger over Earth and all of humanity. The plan takes shape. Gordon turned to the prophet, his jaw set with grim determination. "Tell me what I need to do." The AI's eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating light. "We must infiltrate the Brunel's central hive mind, their psychic nexus. It is the source of their power, the heart of their collective consciousness. If we can plant a psychic virus there, it will spread through their entire network, unraveling their minds from within. But to do that," the prophet continued, "we need a human psychic, someone with the strength and resilience to withstand the Nexus's defenses, someone like Major Briggs." Gordon's eyes widened. "Briggs? But she's stronger than you realize," the prophet said, its voice firm. "Her connection to the Brunel, the conditioning they inflicted upon her, it gives her a unique insight into their minds, a way to navigate their psychic labyrinth." Gordon turned to Briggs, his face a mask of concern. "Are you up for this?" Briggs nodded, her eyes hard with determination. "I'll do it, sir, whatever it takes." The assault begins. As the Indomitable and the remnants of the human fleet approached the Brunel homeworld, the enemy was waiting for them. A vast armada of ships hung in the void, their hulls pulsing with malevolent energy. The battle was joined, and it was like nothing any of them had ever seen. Psychic lightning crackled through the vacuum, searing minds and melting metal. Ships exploded in bursts of searing light, their crews consumed by the maelstrom of mental energy. At the heart of the human fleet, Briggs stood on the bridge of her ship, the amplifier device humming with power around her. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind, feeling the thoughts and emotions of every human soldier, every pilot and gunner and engineer. Their hopes, their fears, their unbreakable will to survive. She gathered them all, weaving them into a shining tapestry of defiance. And then, with a scream of exertion, she unleashed that power against the Brunel. It was like the birth of a new sun. A wave of psychic energy erupted from the human fleet, slamming into the enemy ships with the force of 1,000 supernovas. Brunel warriors writhed in agony, their minds shattered by the onslaught. Their ships faltered and fell, their formation crumbling under the relentless assault. For a moment, it seemed as if victory was within reach, but then the Brunel unveiled their final gambit. From the depths of their fleet, a monstrous shape emerged, a sphere of pure psychic energy, vaster than any ship, pulsing with the stolen life force of 1,000,000 conquered minds. It reached out with tendrils of darkness, ensnaring the minds of the human soldiers, draining their essence like a ravenous beast. One by one, they fell, their bodies withering as their psychic energy was ripped away. Briggs felt it too, a yawning void that threatened to consume her, to unmake everything she was, but she refused to yield. With a last defiant cry, she turned her ship towards the heart of the sphere, pouring every ounce of her will into a final desperate charge. The sphere's outer shell shattered like glass as she pierced its heart. And then she was inside, lost in a hurricane of screaming souls. The agony was beyond anything she had ever imagined, a cacophony of torment that threatened to strip away her very identity. But even as she felt herself slipping away, she held on to one final, unshakable truth. This was her purpose, her destiny. She had been born to face this moment, to give everything she had for the sake of her species. With a smile on her lips and a song in her heart, she let go, surrendering herself to the maelstrom. And as the amplifier device detonated in a blaze of searing light, the sphere collapsed in on itself, imploding in a ripple of psychic destruction that tore through the Brunel fleet like a scythe. In an instant, it was over. The enemy ships hung dead in space, their crews reduced to mindless husks. The hive mind that had driven them was shattered beyond repair, its fragments scattered to the cosmic winds. But the cost had been immense. Briggs was gone, her essence diffused across the stars. And as the Indomitable limped back to Earth, its hull scared, and its crew haunted by the horrors they had witnessed, Gordon felt a hollow ache in his chest. They had won, but at what price? How many more would have to sacrifice everything before humanity could know true peace? The aftermath. Mourning the lost. As General Gordon stood before the memorial wall, his eyes traced the names of the fallen. The weight of their loss pressed down on him like a physical thing. Briggs, the prophet, all the brave souls who had given their lives to hold back the darkness. They were gone, but never forgotten. Their stories would endure, passed down from generation to generation as a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. But even as he mourned, Gordon knew that their struggle was far from over. For every light that was extinguished, another would rise to take its place. For every hero that fell, another would step forward to carry on the fight. As long as a single human heart still beat, the flame of resistance would never be snuffed out. And so, with a heavy heart and an unbreakable will, General Gordon turned his gaze to the stars once more. Whatever the future held, whatever new horrors lurked in the unknown reaches of space, he would be ready. For he was a guardian of Earth, a champion of all that made them human. And he would never stop fighting, never stop pushing back against the darkness, until this final breath. The Indomitable's return. The Indomitable drifted in the void, nestled within the protective embrace of a secret UEF outpost. Inside the battered ship, an exhausted crew tended to their wounds and made urgent repairs. General Gordon sat in his quarters, his head bowed, the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. Major Briggs stepped into the room, her face pale and drawn. "Sir, you should see this." She handed him a data pad, a distress signal pulsing on its screen. Gordon's eyes narrowed as he read the message. A nearby colony under attack by unknown forces. His instincts screamed that it was a trap, another brutal ploy to lure them out. But he couldn't ignore a call for help, not when so many lives were at stake. "Prep a shuttle," he ordered, rising to his feet. "We're going in." The journey to the colony was tense and silent. Gordon watched Briggs out of the corner of his eye, noting the way her hands trembled slightly on the controls. She was still recovering, still haunted by the horrors the Brunel had inflicted on her mind. As they entered the colony's atmosphere, a sense of wrongness washed over them. The buildings below were twisted and warped, their geometries defying the laws of physics. The streets were empty, devoid of any sign of life. They landed in the central square, the shuttle's ramp hissing open. Gordon led the way, his weapon at the ready. The air was thick with a sickly sweet stench, cloying and nauseating. "Where is everyone?" Briggs whispered, her eyes wide and fearful. Gordon shook his head, a sense of dread settling in his gut. They'd moved deeper into the colony, the silence broken only by the crunch of their boots on the shattered pavement. And then they saw the cocoons, huge, pulsing sacks of fleshy tissue scattered throughout the streets. Some were the size of a man, others as large as a shuttle. They throbbed with a sickening rhythm, like the beating of some monstrous heart. The new enemy. Suddenly, one of the cocoons burst open, and a creature emerged. It was insectoid, with chitinous armor and razor-sharp claws. Its eyes gleamed with a malevolent intelligence, and it let out a shrill, piercing cry. More cocoons ruptured, and a swarm of the creatures poured out, their shrieks filling the air. Gordon and his team opened fire, their weapons spitting hot lead into the mass of writhing bodies. But the creatures were resilient, their armor deflecting the bullets like rain. They surged forward, their claws slashing and tearing. In the chaos of the battle, Briggs became separated from the group. She found herself in a narrow alley, her back pressed against a wall. A hulking creature loomed over her, its mandibles dripping with a viscous, noxious fluid. Briggs raised her weapon, but she knew it was futile. The creature was too strong, too fast. It lunged at her, its claws outstretched. And then something awoke within her, a remnant of the Brunel conditioning, a seed of psychic power that had lain dormant in her mind. She felt it surge through her, a searing, blinding energy. With a scream of rage and desperation, she unleashed the power. A blast of psychic energy erupted from her, slamming into the creature. It disintegrated, its body torn apart at the molecular level. The blast rippled outward, engulfing the swarm. The creatures writhed and convulsed, their minds shattered by the psychic onslaught. They fell to the ground, twitching and spasming, before finally falling still. Gordon and the others found Briggs on her knees, her face streaked with tears. They helped her to her feet, their eyes wide with shock and awe. The final confrontation. The psychic revelation. Back on the Indomitable, Briggs sat in Dr. Hoffman's lab, her hands trembling as she recounted what had happened. "I didn't know I could do that," she whispered. I thought the Brunel influence was gone." Gordon placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes intense. "This power, Briggs, it could be the key to winning this war. If you could infiltrate the Brunel hive mind, gather intel on their plans." Briggs looked up at him, fear and determination warring in her eyes. "I'll do it, sir, whatever it takes." Under Dr. Hoffman's guidance, Briggs began to train, honing her psychic abilities. She learned to shield her mind, to navigate the twisting labyrinth of the Brunel's collective consciousness, and as she delved deeper, she uncovered a truth that chilled her to the core. The Brunel didn't just want to conquer humanity. They wanted to assimilate all life, to absorb every mind in the galaxy into their own. They believed it was the path to perfection, to immortality, and they would stop at nothing to achieve it. Briggs brought this knowledge to Gordon, her face ashen with horror. Gordon listened, his jaw tight with grim determination. He would fight to his last breath to stop the Brunel's twisted vision from becoming reality. The infiltration mission. In the depths of the Indomitable, Gordon began to plan, his mind racing with desperate strategies and daring gambits. He would need every resource, every ally, every trick in the book. But he would not fail. He could not. The weight of billions of lives rested on his shoulders, and he would carry that weight no matter the cost. Major Briggs leaned forward, her eyes haunted but resolute. "I'm in, sir, whatever it takes." Gordon brought up a holographic map, a swirling mass of asteroids and debris. "The facility is located here, in the heart of the graveyard. We'll have to navigate through this hellscape to reach it. And that's not the worst of it." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "The Brunel have psychic defenses that can get inside your head, make you see things that aren't there. We'll be facing our own worst nightmares in there." In the shuttle bay, the team prepared for the mission, checking weapons and gear with practiced efficiency. Briggs sat in a corner, her eyes closed, her brow furrowed in concentration as she honed her psychic shields. The shuttle launched, slipping into the void like a silent predator. As they approached the graveyard, the comm crackled with eerie whispers, ghostly echoes of the doomed ships that had come before. For Briggs, it was the faces of the men and women he'd lost under his command, their accusing eyes boring into his soul. For Gordon, it was the specter of failure, the weight of billions of lives crushing him into oblivion. And for Briggs, it was the dissector's voice, whispering in the depths of her mind, promising power and pain in equal measure. The shuttle docked with the facility, a looming monstrosity of twisted metal and pulsing flesh. Inside, the horror was unimaginable. Tanks of mutated abominations lined the walls, their misshapen forms twitching in viscous fluid. Screams echoed from hidden chambers, the agonized wails of human test subjects. Bile rose in Gordon's throat, but he pushed it down. They had to keep moving. The heart of the labyrinth. In the heart of the labyrinth, they found the schematics, glowing on a pedestal like a perverted holy grail. But as Gordon reached for them, a voice cut through the air like a scalpel. The dissector stepped from the shadows, his face a mask of cruel amusement. "Come back to me, and all this can end. Your friends can live. You can have the power you've always craved." Briggs staggered, clutching her head as the dissector's presence slammed into her mind like a tidal wave. threatening to sweep away all that she was. But in that moment, she saw the truth, saw the monster she would become if she gave in. With a scream that shook the stars, she unleashed the full fury of her psychic might. The dissector reeled, his mind locked in mortal combat with hers. Around them, the facility began to crumble, the psychic feedback tearing it apart. Alarms shrieked, containment tanks shattered, horrors spilling forth. "We have to go now," Gordon roared, snatching up the schematics. The team fought their way back to the shuttle, blasting through the abominations that barred their path. In the heart of the maelstrom, Briggs and the dissector dueled, their minds blazing with psychic fire. But Briggs was weakening, the strain too much for any human to bear. In a final, desperate act, she severed the link between them, cutting off the dissector's hold on her mind. The backlash sent her crashing to the ground, blood pouring from her nose and ears. Gordon scooped her up, carrying her limp form to the shuttle as the facility imploded behind them, burying the dissector and his horrors beneath a mountain of rubble.